Carl Jung discovered something that changes everything we think we know about achieving success and finding peace. The moment you stop forcing life is the moment real power begins. And what he found in his patients who learned this truth will shock you. Throughout his career, Jung noticed a pattern that terrified him. His most burned-out patients, the ones drowning in anxiety and failure, all had one thing in common. They were trying to control everything. They pushed, manipulated, and forced their way through life. And the harder they tried, the worse things got. But then something would happen. They would hit rock bottom, give up the fight, and suddenly life would open up in ways they never imagined. Jung called this the Great Surrender. And once you understand it, you can never see the world the same way again. Jung was haunted by a question that kept him awake at night. Why do some people achieve everything they want while barely trying, while others work themselves to death and get nowhere? He found his answer in a place nobody expected. The ones who succeeded had stopped fighting against life's natural flow. They had discovered what Jung called alignment with the self, and the struggling ones were trapped in what he termed the tyranny of the ego. This wasn't just philosophy. Jung had the proof. In 1913, during the darkest period of his life, Jung treated a patient who would change everything. This person had tried everything to fix their miserable existence. Therapy, medication, willpower, positive thinking. Nothing worked. They controlled every detail of their life, planned every move, and tried to force every outcome. And they were completely falling apart. Jung realized he wasn't looking at someone who needed to try harder. He was looking at someone who needed to stop trying altogether. The problem wasn't lack of effort. The problem was that effort itself had become the disease. Jung started to understand something that most people spend their whole lives never learning. The ego, that voice in your head that thinks it knows what's best, is actually terrible at running your life. It operates from fear, from the need to control, from the desperate belief that if you don't force things to happen, nothing will happen at all. But underneath the ego's frantic activity, there's something much wiser. Jung called it the self. And the self doesn't need to force anything because it already knows where you're meant to go. Here's what made Jung's blood run cold when he discovered this pattern. Every patient who was forcing their way through life was actually working against their own psychological nature. They were like someone trying to sail a boat by blowing on their own sails. All that effort, all that struggle, and they were getting nowhere because they were fighting the very forces that could carry them forward. The ego believes it must control everything, or life will fall apart. But Jung discovered the opposite is true. When you stop forcing, when you surrender the ego's desperate need to control, that's when life finally starts working. Jung identified what he called the act of will problem. This is when someone believes that pure effort and determination can overcome anything. They wake up every day with plans, goals, strategies, and backup plans for their backup plans. They force themselves through difficult relationships, trying to make people change. They force their careers, pushing for promotions and recognition. They force their own emotions, trying to think positive and suppress anything negative. And they wonder why they feel like they're drowning. Jung realized these people weren't failing because they weren't trying hard enough. They were failing because trying itself had become the problem. Think about the last time you really wanted something. Maybe a relationship, a job, a goal you were desperate to achieve. Remember how you thought about it constantly, planned every detail, tried to control every variable. And remember how the more you pushed, the further away it seemed to get. That's not coincidence. That's what Jung called egoic forcing in action. The ego believes that thinking about something, worrying about it, controlling it, will make it happen. But all that mental effort actually pushes away the very thing you want. It's like trying to grab water. The tighter you squeeze, the more